Why was a temple meant to be one of the 7 wonders never finished? What happened to the Colossus of Rhodes, a massive statue that stood tall for just 56 years before it was destroyed? And the Great Wall of China, an iconic symbol of strength, but did you know huge sections were never completed? These are unfinished ancient megastructures from history that were abandoned. The Temple of Artemis at Ephesus was an ancient Greek temple in what is now Turkey, supposed to be one of the grandest temples ever built. It was designed to be massive, imagine 127 columns, each one over 60 feet tall, and a marble structure so impressive that it was listed as one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. But as grand as this place was, the temple was never fully completed. It was burned down in 356 BCE by a man named Herostratus, who was trying to gain fame by burning it down. After the fire, they tried to rebuild it, but it just kept running into problems. The area was constantly under threat of invaders, and political instability kept interfering with the reconstruction. Over the centuries, it went through a bunch of different rebuilds, but no one ever had the chance to finish the full thing. And finally, the Goths, a group of Germanic tribes that played a huge part in the fall of the Western Roman Empire, attacked and destroyed what remained of it in 262 CE. And that was pretty much the end of the temple. Today, all we've got are foundations and little fragments of the last temple, a reminder of something that could have been much more. When the Colossus of Rhodes was built, it was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, towering over 100 feet tall. It was an incredible feat of engineering and a symbol of Rhodes' power. The statue, designed to honor the sun god Helios, took 12 years to build, but it didn't even last 56 years. A massive earthquake hit it in 226 BCE, toppling the statue into pieces. And then it was just never rebuilt. You'd think the Rhodians would rush to put it back up, but they didn't. Some say it was just too expensive, others think the statue's size just made it too hard to rebuild. It makes sense. They just spent over a decade building the thing for it to collapse just a little over 50 years later. They were probably just like, forget it, there's other things we gotta focus our energy on. And unfortunately, unlike a lot of the other places you'll see on this list, there's nothing left of this statue today. The remaining parts were sold off as scrap way back in the day, so all we have are stories and a few ancient sketches. And based on those, it does look like the thing was pretty awe-inspiring. We all know the Great Wall of China as one of the world's most iconic ancient structures, and as amazing as it was originally going to be even more grand. Not all of it is finished. Sure, we've got the grand sections that have been restored and preserved, but there are a lot of long stretches of the wall that were never fully completed. The wall wasn't all built at once, and some parts of it were built hastily. Different dynasties worked on it over the centuries, but the work was always interrupted by rebellions and logistical problems. Some sections were abandoned halfway through because the resources just weren't there anymore, or there was simply no need to continue. And in some cases, entire stretches of the wall were neglected and left to fall apart. The most famous parts of the wall were heavily restored during the Ming Dynasty, but if you travel further out, you'll find these abandoned, incomplete sections with crumbling stones and wildlife growing around them. Not what you typically picture when you think of the Great Wall of China. The Ziggurat of Ur, built around 2100 BCE, was an enormous stepped pyramid meant to honor the moon god Mana. It was a massive undertaking for the Sumerians, and it was supposed to make it one of the greatest structures of the ancient world, but like many ancient projects, the full vision never came to fruition. The Sumerians were very advanced when it came to a lot of things, but with all the invasions and internal conflict, their civilization eventually just collapsed. So by the time the ziggurat was nearly complete, things had gotten bad enough that the resources to finish the structure just weren't there anymore and had to be diverted elsewhere. And as the empire continued to fall apart, the ziggurat sat incomplete and much of the surrounding area was abandoned. But fortunately, the remnants of the ziggurat are still standing today. The Unfinished Obelisk in Aswan is just one giant piece of stone that was meant to be erected as an obelisk. If it had been completed, it would have been the largest obelisk in Egypt, measuring 138 feet and weighing about 1,200 tons. Given ancient Egypt's track record of incredible giant structures, this one would have been pretty awesome. But of course, it was never finished. The ancient Egyptians had started carving it out of the rock, but while it was still in the quarry, the stone cracked. The workers had no choice but to abandon the project. So today, you can still visit this gigantic chunk of stone that was originally going to be standing upright. It's just sitting there, still attached to the bedrock. It's kind of sad, right? The fact that this thing was so close to being finished, but then, whether it was a technical failure or just bad luck, it was left unfinished forever. The Temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus was meant to be the grandest temple in all of Rome, dedicated to the king of the gods. It was supposed to outshine all other temples in the ancient world, but the final version of the temple was never fully realized. It started construction in the 6th century BCE, but after a series of political issues and with the growing instability in Rome, the project just didn't go as planned. The temple went through a number of phases, and only parts of it were ever finished. The temple was looted, burned, and rebuilt tons of times over the centuries, with different emperors taking on the project but never fully completing its original design. By the time it was finally abandoned, it wasn't even close to what it had been meant to be. It's this unfinished dream of Roman grandeur that never really saw its full potential, and is now just another reminder of how politics, power struggles, and time itself can shape the legacy of a civilization. The Tower of Babel is a story a lot of people know from the Bible. It was this giant tower built to reach the heavens, but according to the story, God wasn't too happy about human ambition and scattered the people, confusing their language and causing the project to fall apart. It's a cautionary tale about becoming too prideful, that no matter how intelligent and ambitious you are, you're still human, no match for the guy upstairs. And it attempts to explain why people around the globe speak different languages, of course. But regardless of how you feel about the moral of the story and the religious side of it, could there be a historical event that it's pulling from? Did the Babylonians try to build something massive, something that would rival anything that had come before it? Well, some historians think the Tower of Babel was inspired by the ziggurats in Mesopotamia, like the one we talked about before, which were big, step pyramids used for religious ceremonies. But the tower was never finished, whether it was because of the political collapse of the Babylonian Empire or the project was just overly ambitious to begin with. We'll never know. Hadrian's Wall is another unfinished project that spans 73 miles across northern Britain, built by the Romans to protect the empire from the Picts, who were the ancient people of what is now Scotland. The wall wasn't completed all at once, and in some areas it's pretty clear the Romans just didn't finish what they started. They clearly hit some serious roadblocks, mainly politics and war. Scotland was just that last place they could never break into. Plus, the huge challenge of constructing something so massive across very uneven terrain, it was just too tough. Some parts were thrown together quickly, other sections were just left unfinished. Even now, the wall is a bit of a mix of finished and unfinished bits. It's a reminder that even the most impressive military projects don't always turn out the way they're planned. The Romans were incredible engineers, but even they couldn't pull off Hadrian's Wall the way they'd imagined. The Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem is one of the most famous religious structures in the world, but the build didn't go as smoothly as many think. At first, the design was actually way bigger and more elaborate, but with all the political chaos and changes in leadership during the 7th century, parts of the dome had to be scaled back. The original idea, with all its detailed mosaics and huge dome, had to be adjusted, and even after it was finished, there were always parts being restored or rebuilt. The unfinished parts of the Dome of the Rock don't just show how tough the construction was, they also reflect the political and religious changes going on in Jerusalem at the time, and that actually makes it pretty interesting. Angkor Wat is the largest religious monument in the world, and it still wasn't finished. The temple complex was first built in the early 12th century by the Khmer king Suryavarman II. It was supposed to be a grand tribute to the Hindu god Vishnu, and the plans were massive, multi-level galleries, detailed carvings everywhere, towering buildings. But as big as the plans were, the temple itself was never really finished. The Khmer Empire was on the decline during its construction, and internal power struggles along with the constant threat of invasion slowed down the work. The temple went through all these phases of construction, but a lot of the intricate work just stopped, likely because the resources had dried up and the empire just weren't able to support such an ambitious project. By the time the empire fell in the 15th century, the temple was still incomplete, but who cares? I mean, whatever, it's an incredible sight today, especially now with all the vines and stuff growing over parts of it. Seeing this place in person would be absolutely breathtaking. All that said, I've been your host James, and I'll catch you, yes you specifically, in the next video.